Welcome to another video on data to decisions. In today's video, we will be looking at the new group by function from Microsoft Excel. This function became widely available recently, and now it's time to look at how we can put this to use whenever we want to aggregate data in Microsoft Excel. The functionality somewhat overlaps with the pivot table functionality. However, there are some differences. And so in this video, we will look at 14 examples of how you can use the new function to aggregate or group data in Microsoft Excel. Let's get started. Before we begin, let me just explain briefly what dataset we will be using. This is a list of all the Test cricket matches played by India, and there are 582 different matches, and the result of each of the match is shown, whether the team won or lost or draw, and then the date when the match was played, and then which country was this match played against, and whether that was a home or an away match, and also the region of the country, the year in which it was played, and the last column is basically a 0 or 1. If it was a win, it'll be 1, otherwise it's a 0. So this is the numeric column that we will be using for aggregating the data, most of the examples in this video, and then we will be using some of the other columns as needed. So each row represents each match. Okay, now having set the stage, now let's start looking at our 14 examples. So the first one is just a simple group by, right? I just want to know how many matches did India play against each of these countries. So what I'm going to do is to type in group by, open parenthesis. The column that I want to group by is the country column. So I'm going to click on the country header. Remember, clicking on the header, Control Shift down arrow. Now, what Excel has done is basically said, okay, this is your table. And I forgot to mention that the name of the table is T underscore results. Always convert your data into a table and give it an appropriate name. So in my case, I've named it T underscore results. So T underscore results, all, and then the name of the column that I want. This includes the header and the data. Now, what do I want to summarize? Which value do I want to summarize? Let's say I just want to count the number of matches. So I can go to the first column, which is not just like a match number. So it is called matches. And so I've chosen that column, comma, I'm going to type in count. You see that the third parameter is the function, which is the aggregation function. So how do you want to aggregate the data? Do you want to sum it? Do you want to take an average? Do you want to count? Do you want to do a max min? All that stuff. So I'm going to choose count because my first example, I just want to count the number of matches by country. Press enter. That's it. Very simple formula. This is the result. And again, this is a dynamic array function. So what happens is the result will be spilled over. So if there are 20 countries, automatically there will be more data output from this function. Okay, so this is the first example. You could easily change this from counting the number of matches to totaling the number of wins or summing the number of wins. So how do I do it? Change the value column that you are referring to and do a sum function. So sum of the wins column. And in your case, your data, let's say you have revenue in a column, you can sum up the revenue and so on, right? So what I've done now is given the total number of wins against each country. Okay, so the total is 179. This is the first scenario. Okay, let's go to the second scenario. The second scenario is basically just to say, as a reporting output, we want to make sure that the column headers are there, right? When you produce this as an output, it doesn't say what does column n mean. So this is where I'm just going to copy the formula, paste it in here, but this time I want to have the header. So I'm just going to do comma, and I'm going to choose number 3 as the value here because it will then have, we know that the input data we have provided already has the headers and I want it to be visible. That's it. So I choose number 3. And again, those other options are there for different scenarios, but I'm just going to say 3 works for me in this case. And now I have country, wins, and then the total. Okay. The bolding doesn't happen automatically. It's something that the formatting doesn't happen automatically with this function, so we have to do separately ourselves. Now the country and the number of wins are very clearly visible at the header. The next thing I want to do is I don't want to see the total. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. So how do you control it? So my third example here, I'm just going to copy the formula again. Okay. And this time I'm going to add another parameter. By default, you are getting the totals, which is the grand total. But let's say I don't want to see any totals. I put 0, press enter. So now the total goes away. Very, very simple. Now let's go to the fourth example. The fourth example I want to do is, you can notice that this is not ordered by the number of wins. It is sorted based on the country name from, alphabetically, but that is just the default. What if I want to change how I want to display the output? Very easy. You go to the formula, and the next parameter is the sorting order. So the sorting order, let's just try a few things. Like, let's say if I put 1, it's basically saying the country column sorted alphabetically. If I put -1, country column reverse alphabetical. So Zimbabwe goes first and Afghanistan goes to the end. So we can now see that the first column, whether it's positive or negative, will change. So now I want to sort it by the wins, number of wins. So I'm going to do -2. Now it goes in the descending order. So then the maximum number of wins goes to the top, the minimum goes to the bottom. If you want the other way, just do +2 instead of -2. And now the least number of wins goes to the top, ascending order for the second column. So this is how you can control this sort order. Now let's go to the fifth example, which is filtering. So this is great. We have the number of wins, but what if I wanted to filter only the wins that were away from India? So matches played away from India. How can I do that? Very simple. So let's put the totals back up again because I want to see how the totals change. So I've chosen 1 in my total parameter, and so this will give me the total. So 179 is the total number of wins, but once I want to filter to the away wins, let's see how the numbers change. So I'm going to go add one more parameter. So you would have noticed in this sequence of my examples, I'm just adding more parameters that are available within the function so we can further customize according to the results we expect from the function. So the next parameter is a filter array. The filter array allows us to apply any conditions. So I'm going to go and choose the home and away column. Same thing, choose the header, Control Shift down arrow. And then now I'm going to put a equals and say only away. Okay, just press enter. Let's come back here. So what happened is we added a filter condition. This equals away, and now you saw that the total is 134. So if I want to change this to home, only home wins. Now I get only 45. So clearly you can apply the filter condition and make the results only reflect what was filtered out. Okay, so that's the number 5. Sixth example we're going to use is where we want 2 different aggregations of the same column. So let me explain how this works. So I'm just going to take all this for now and then paste it here. And this time, what I'm going to do is look at the earliest victory against each country. Okay. So in this case, what I will do is I want to do minimum of the year. Okay. So remember again, the first column is how you want to group by first parameter, which is the country. The second parameter is what is your value column. In this case, I want to take the earliest year. So year is the value column, and then the earliest, which is the minimum, is the function. So I've done minimum as the function. And when we do this, do I want the header? Yes. Do I want the total? No. Let's not have the total because we're looking at earliest year, so I don't need to know the total there. And then also the sort order is, let's say we leave it as 2. And then the one important thing here is we want to only look at the wins. So what I'm going to do is to change this filter to result equals 1. So now this will only take into account the wins by India. And so what it represents is the first victory for India versus England happened in 1952. The first victory for India versus Australia happened in 1959. Okay, so this basically is filtering the data for result equals 1 by India, and then it takes the minimum of the year column. That's it. Okay. So now this is still only one aggregation. I promised you 2 aggregations. So the way to do that would be, instead of passing one function, you can pass 2 functions. So I'm going to do a h stack of min and max. Okay. All I'm doing is, in the function parameter, I'm doing h stack of min comma max. Okay. Now that's it. So now for each country, I know the earliest and also the latest victory. So we can have both in here. And so Pakistan 1952 was the earliest victory for India, but the latest was 2007. So this is how you can aggregate the data with 2 aggregations on the same column. And you do not have to be min and max. I mean, you could have, depending on the column, other functions also, like count, percent off, and all those other functions that are available. Now let's take another example, which is the 7th example here. I'm going to take the same thing. Instead of horizontally stacking the metrics, can we stack them vertically? Yes. So all we have to do is to do, instead of h stack, you can do VStack or vertical stacking. And so now you can have, for each country, you can have the minimum and maximum in rows. And sometimes this kind of layout is useful. And this is where you have this flexibility to choose how you want to stack the metrics. Now let's continue. And this time I'm going to use the 8th example. Now we can write a new function also. What I want to do is to show when you have 2 different columns. So in the previous example, we used year and then picked the minimum and maximum. So basically one value column, but you ended up doing 2 aggregations. But this time what we're going to do is we will do 2 value columns, and let's see which one we want to pick. So I want to know the minimum year and also the sum of the bins. So let's say I want to use both those columns. So how do I do it? So let's write again, group by, and we want to do group by country, and then I want to know the minimum of the year. So I'm just going to select these 2 columns because they are right next to each other. So I've selected the 2 value columns, year and the number of wins. Awesome. And then what is the function do I want to do? But year and wins, I need to use 2 different functions. So minimum of the year, sum of the wins. So how do I do it? So this is where I will again use h stack, minimum comma sum. And remember, the minimum will go to the year and the sum will go against the wins. And then do I want the header? Yes. And then do I want any totals? Not right now. And then the sort order, I'm just going to use the country, let's say, so which is number 1, and then the no filters and nothing else. So I'll just close it. So let's see what the result is. So what this says is, the first time a victory happened, let's use Australia as an example, the first year when it was played is 1947, and then 32 is the total number of wins. If you want to know the minimum year when the victory was there, then we need to put the filter, which is go back to the result column and then say equals 1. This will now say, when was the first victory against Australia? 1959. How many wins have you gotten? 32. So for example, Sri Lanka and New Zealand, they both have the same number of wins, but you see that there was 31 years difference between when the first win came. So even though Sri Lanka, the first win came only in 1986, pretty quickly. Again, we're not looking at how many matches they played, but just from a year's perspective, now we have 22 wins against both the teams. So the point here is you can have two different aggregations, minimum and sum. You can also do against two different value columns. So this one is aggregating on the year, and this one is based on the wins column. So this is how you can do it. But in this case, the year and the wins, those two columns were side by side, adjacent. What if they were not adjacent? So let's do the number 9 example. Let's see how I can do it. When we chose the value, we chose year comma wins, right? Because they're right next to each other, we selected them right like that. But what if I want to count the number of total wins and also the number of matches? Okay, so what I'm going to do is to choose columns, okay, and I can choose let's say, for example, this table, the whole table, and then I can choose the column numbers. So for example, okay, first column is the number of matches. The last column is the number of wins. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So, and then I want to do a count of matches and then a sum of wins. And I don't need to have this filter. So let's see what it does. Okay. So now let's put the total back because it will be helpful for us to validate. So there are totally 582 matches, and this is the number of matches against each country, but the number of wins or the total wins against is here. So what we have done now is the two columns that we use, matches and the wins, are not next to each other, right? However, we are still able to use it in our group by function. That's the difference between example 8 and 9. How you choose the specific columns that you want, and then you apply the aggregation function, just like always using the stack function. So there is also an alternative way of choosing the specific columns if they are not next to each other. So another one is, instead of choose columns, you can do stack, which we have used already for stacking the functions. You can stack the value columns too. So I can say choose the matches column, and then I can choose the wins column. So now there are two columns which are not next to each other. I've just stacked them using the stack function. We're already stacking the aggregation function. We don't have to change that. So now you will get exactly the same result, which is counting the number of matches and then summing the number of wins. So that's our example number 9. So let's continue with our example number 10, which is, what if I have more than one column by which I want to group? So far we have been grouping it by country, but what if I want to group by region and country? So how do I do that? So let's go and write a new group by function. And this time I want to choose two different grouping by columns. So I could do a stack. I can say stack it by region and then by country. So now I have two columns in the grouping by the row fields. So what do I want to do by region and country? So let's say, for example, we just want to count the number of wins. So all I have to do now is to choose the wins column, comma, and then type sum. And do I want to see the headers? Yes. No totals. Okay. And then forget about the sort order for now. Let's see what the result is, and then we'll change the data. So here, by region and country, we have some data. But let's think about how to sort this. What am I going to do? Comma. Third column is the wins column. So I will do, let's say 3. 3 means it should do an ascending order. But you notice that it is not, because England has there have been 35 wins against England, but it is in the middle. It's not sorting by the wins. So this may seem a little bit unusual. And you can even do -3 and notice that It doesn't do descending order also. This is not in any order, right? But there is. So what is the order? Why does Excel react like this when we group by two columns, right? So the answer is Excel is now still sorting descending order. However, it's taking into account the region column. Okay, I'll explain why, how, by adding the subtotals now. So I'm just going to put 2 here because it'll give the grand total and subtotals. And now you'll see the difference. The reason why it is sorted this way is because Australia as a region has the highest wins, 54. Asia has the second highest wins region, 44. And then comes Europe. There's only one country in this data set again, in the Europe region, and that is why it is still lower than Asia and Australia region, and that is why it is there. So what Excel is doing, it's first finding out the totals by region, and then it orders based on that. Okay, if this is what you want to have, this works fine, but I'll give you an alternative way also. If you don't want this type of sorting, you want to sort it by the number of wins directly, there is a way, which is our example number 11. So how are we going to do it? So I'm just going to copy this formula and then paste it here. There is an option for you to go and this is the last parameter available, field relationship. I'm not going to do any filtering. If you don't want to do any of the parameters, you can optional parameters, you can just leave a blank. Okay. Now I go to the last parameter and then say, what are my options? 0 or 1. 0 is the default, but what I'm going to do now is to use table. Okay. Now it doesn't work. Here's why. When we change it to the table option, you cannot do any subtotals. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my total parameter and change it to no totals. Okay. And now you get the result back. So we have done exactly the same in the top and the bottom. The difference is this one is clearly sorted by the number of wins. Okay. Whereas the top one, it is sorted first based on the subtotal by region and then listed. So that's the difference. So if you want, in your example or in your cases, if you want to sort it just purely based on the wins column or the measure column, then add a parameter 1, the last parameter, the field relationship, as 1. And that should help create the output as we see at the bottom here. And again, as noted already, you can't do subtotals here. So if you want to have subtotals, then you have to go with the first option. If you don't want the subtotals and still want to sort it this way, then you can go to the option number 11. Let's continue. The next example is going to be somewhat different, where I want to know what has been the win-loss history against each country in recent years. Okay, so what I'm going to do is to do a group by, and I want to do group by country. So I'll just do country, very simple. And then what I'm going to do is, what result do I want is I want to have the result column. So I think everything will make sense when we see the output. Let's bring them together. Okay, result. And what I want to do is not counting. I want to use the ArrayToText function. And then I can do, so now you see all of this, and I'll simplify this further because I want to put a filter. So let's add the header. I don't want any totals. Do I want any sort order? It doesn't matter. Now, what do I want to filter this? I want to filter this by only recent years. So I'm just going to select all the years and then say greater than 2021, something like that. And let's see what the results are. Okay. So for each country, I know the recent results. And this example I want to show here because you don't have to bring back only one value as output. You can concatenate or convert it into a string of text, right? So we can do something like this where against Australia, the last 5 results have been this. Against Bangladesh, the last 3. The reason why it is 3 or 5 or whatever it is, because we put a filter only the matches where the year is 2021, no, greater than 2021, right? So this is an example of using the ArrayToText function to convert the data into an array. And again, we can use concatenate also. There is another function that's available. In this case, it doesn't put the delimiter. So I think maybe there's a way, but I think this looks better to show results if you want multiple values in your output. So that's our example number 12. Now, use case number 13 is you get all these results from the group by function, but how do I, in some cases, when you're building reports in Excel, you may want to build on top of this group by result. So you get a group by, and then let's say I want to build another formula based on this. So yes, you can do it. So what I'm going to do is example number 13. I'm going to do, let's say, a simple index of this. Remember that I have to put a hash at the end. So it basically takes the dynamic array, comma, and then I want to say, give me the second row, first column. Now it'll give me Australia because this is the second row, first column. But if I want to get second row, second column, I can do so. If I want to get all the rows in my second column, then I just do this and it'll give me all the rows in the second column. So what I'm trying to say is you can refer to this array, which is the result from the group by function, and then you can build your new formula, which will, however you want to manipulate the data by. So it's very, very simple for you to build, use this group by as an intermediate step also. Now, for the last example, I want to use conditional formatting. Let's pick one of these group by, let's use the subtotal example, right? So typically, you don't want to represent these kind of, aggregations, especially with multiple columns, this way because it's a little bit harder to read. This is where conditional formatting can come in. There are many ways to do it, so I'll just give some simple examples here. First thing, I can just say, I'm going to select this, conditional formatting, new rule. What I want to do for subtotals, I want to give a different color. So I can say equals AS2, which is the first cell in my selection. But basically what I want to do is if the second column is a blank, right? So that's actually AT2, which is the second column in my selection, equals blank, then give some kind of fill, right? So maybe I'll do this. Okay. So now what it has done, let's go back and check my rule. What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? A2. Okay, so I know what I did wrong. Second column locked, 0. So now what happens is whenever this column AT has a blank, you will see the color getting filled, the color that we chose. But what we don't want is the grand total also to have the same. So we can have a different conditional formatting rule. So I'll go here, new rule, and I can say this time column lock AS2 equals grand total. And for grand totals, you can do a little bit different. So maybe I do a border, and then I may do a different fill color and bold the font. Okay, so now you have a different formatting display for the grand totals. And finally, if you want to just put a border on all these, you can, or you can make that a little bit more dynamic also by going into new rule and then say AS2 is not equal to blank, then just do a border, okay, something like this. So you get the picture, right? So you can also, bold the header if you'd like. There are some limitations with the approach that we have taken, but I just want to introduce you to the concept of you can simply easily color the subtotals and the grand total to make the data a lot more easy to read. Okay, and again, this is a dynamic range, so obviously there can be more complexities involved when the data set is expanding. I'm happy to cover that in a future video about some of the more conditional formatting tips. I just want to introduce you to that in this video. So those are the 14 practical uses of how you can use group by function to aggregate the data easily in Microsoft Excel and create dynamic reporting, which was not possible until recently using just formulas or simple formula like this. It has been possible using some more complex formulas or pivot tables, but now it becomes more accessible. So definitely check it out. I think that will be one of the go-to functions to use for Excel users. And please check out our other videos from the Data to Decision series. We have a lot of videos about how to use Excel more effectively. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you soon in the next one.